Ready? Hello? Can everyone hear me? Amazing. If you can't hear me, put on your headphones. Okay, so we're gonna start. I wanna thank everybody for being here today and welcome you to the Resilience Hub. My name is Shia Bastida, and I'm one of the global ambassadors for the High Level Champions. And I'm also somebody who started as a climate activist out in the streets protesting. And this is one of the examples of how youth voices start to be included in more formal spaces so that we can have incidents. And the same thing happens with indigenous communities, with indigenous peoples, that so often we are from our territories trying to get to these type of places where we can share our voices and our knowledge. And the resilience, the Race to Resilience and the Resilience Hub is giving that space now to indigenous peoples from non-stakeholders, non-party stakeholders. So we're going to have two panels today and also a Q&A. I'm really excited for you to hear these different experiences and also for a very exciting announcement that we will have. So without further ado, I'm really excited to first introduce the opening remarks of Rasan. Rasan Al Mubarak is the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP28. And Rasan has been personally a great inspiration and just somebody who has really championed gender, indigenous peoples, and women. So Rasan, please, you have the word, and we're so happy to have you here today.
Good afternoon, dear friends, dear colleagues, brothers and sisters. It is my great pleasure to address you today, though unfortunately I'm unable to be with you all in person. We all know this. Nature is our lifeline. Its forests and oceans are our lungs, regulating climate and sustaining billions of people. And we also know that to achieve our climate goals, we must protect, manage, and restore nature's essential systems. Communities on the front line feel the full impact of climate change and biodiversity loss. For people to remain resilient, natural systems must be resilient as well. Protecting nature and advancing the climate justice means uplifting those who defend it, and Indigenous peoples are key climate and nature actors. The IPCC's sixth assessment report underscores this value. It underscores the value of Indigenous peoples' knowledge as essential to climate adaptation. Indigenous communities' profound understanding of ecosystems offers sustainable resources and management and adaptation strategies. We are making progress. Not enough, but we are, in the acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples. Major frameworks now recognize the value of Indigenous traditional knowledge systems. COP28's Global Stocktake and the Global Goal on Adaptation both affirm that effective adaptation must integrate Indigenous peoples' knowledge and insights. Indigenous-led initiatives demonstrate how traditional ecological knowledge enhances climate resilience while protecting biodiversity. This holistic approach to ecosystem management offers proven solutions for addressing climate challenges while maintaining ecological balance. Yet, we still do not have a clear and comprehensive understanding of the full range of unique expertise of Indigenous peoples and their systems and knowledge systems and the support that they need. And this is why we launched together the Indigenous Peoples Data Study earlier this year. And I am pleased that the Indigenous Peoples Global Partnership on Climate Change, Forests and Sustainable Development, the ELATIA Consortium, will provide updates on the study's progress today. I'm also delighted by the Race to Resilience campaign's commitment to amplify Indigenous peoples' unique role and leadership. Today, the Race to Resilience partners are already engaged in actions to support 2 billion people across 164 countries. These partners are leading the way toward a resilient future, and I'm pleased that we will have gained a new partner in our gathering today to support these efforts. With the 10-year facility joining us, the Race to Resilience is contributing to securing the land and forest rights of Indigenous peoples as a key solution to increasing resilience. Through Race to Resilience and partners like the 10-year facility and Elatia, we are building frameworks that honor Indigenous knowledge as foundational to the global climate action agenda. Together, by uniting traditional knowledge, by uniting science, we can build a more resilient future for all, one that values and amplifies the wisdom of nature's greatest stewards. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Rasan. Can you all hear me fine? Yes, amazing, thank you. Rasan has always championed from the very beginning the voices of Indigenous communities, and it's not only that she said it once, she kept practicing it and listening. And to that end, I'm delighted to welcome Hannah Beswick, who is Rasan's senior advisor. Hannah, please take the podium and share with us some other perspectives from Rasan and Indigenous people's involvement. Everybody welcome Hannah.
Thank you so much, Shia. I'm really here today. I know I'm no substitute for Razan. You all know her very well, and she is the champion of champions for our world stewards of nature, Indigenous peoples. But please allow me to extend her regrets for not being able to be here today and just her warm welcome to the 10-year facility. We have Nanette with us, our newest partner in the Race to Resilience, and also the women's movement of the Global Alliance on Territorial Communities, who will be our soon-to-be partner. So please join me in giving them a round of applause for joining us shortly now. Thank you. So, Razan said it best, nature is our lifeline. We know Indigenous peoples are our stewards, and we are just delighted to be able to welcome these new partners to the Race to Resilience, and we hope that this is just the beginning of welcoming more Indigenous partners in the future. Something else that Razan spotlighted in her remarks from Dubai just now was this global data study that we are working on. This is a key outcome of her commitment to Indigenous peoples and the wider climate action community that she made at COP28 in Dubai last year. This is a study that we have inaugurated, just kicked off really this last summer. And the overarching goal and outcomes, we're really trying to detail in a quite granular way the contributions of Indigenous peoples in climate action, in conservation. And we want to understand how we get more direct finance to Indigenous peoples in this critical work. Something critical she wanted me to share with you here is that this study is Indigenous-led. As she mentioned, our implementing partner, ELEPA, based in Kenya, is part of the wider Elatia Consortium, which represents 19 Indigenous peoples organizations across 13 countries. We've thus far hired a lead author for the study. We have consultants thus far, all Indigenous, from 6 of the 7 socioeconomic regions. We're working on that 7th. We also have an advisory committee and an external expert peer review group, all made up of Indigenous peoples. The study itself takes into account the Indigenous principle of free, prior, and informed consent. And we also believe that we're doing our best to work with our partners to respect cultural and global diversity. And really critically, the methodology that we've worked through with our Indigenous partners here is going to be qualitative in nature. The study's authors are really looking at this through a lens of decolonization by collecting stories and case studies from all socioeconomic regions of the world. It's our hope that this collection of stories is going to serve as a sort of compendium of this is what it means across deforestation, across oceans, across all of the various ecosystems, to serve as this evidence base of the massive contributions that Indigenous peoples make in climate action and our biodiversity stewardship and restoration. We're really hoping, as an outcome, we're really working towards this at COP30 to show our progress, that it will be easily accessible for Indigenous peoples themselves to use in their own grant making and direct finance requests, but also that this will kind of be, as Razan would say, the proof in the pudding. When we go to speak to the existing climate finance infrastructure, which we all know needs to be reformed to reflect Indigenous knowledge and wisdom, but that we can really take this to them to show them the business case or why we need to be investing more in Indigenous peoples. So thus far, we've collected about 500 case studies from across the world. We are still in that data collection phase, which we're going to continue through about March or April of 2025. My colleague Lena is here in the audience. Raise your hand, Lena. She can give you some more information a little bit after our wonderful panel that's to come today. But we're also right now in the process of collecting more stories and case studies. And so this is a call to everyone to contribute, to share that call to action. We have an email set up so that colleagues can contribute in any way they see fit. There is no specific format we are requesting, but we know that this will only be the most impactful if it is inclusive and representative of global Indigenous communities around the world. So with that, there's something that I'm going to borrow from an Indigenous sister of mine about why this work is so important to Razan, to the champions, and to the wider resilience community. A few days ago, many of you may know Joan Carlin, and she shared her reflections on Indigenous peoples and the need for direct finance in climate action and nature conservation. And the words that have really stuck with me over the past few days is that this isn't about charity, this is about justice. And that's really the way that Razan and the wider resilience folks are looking at this. And so it's really our team's intention, and I hope you'll work with us here, that we can contribute in a small way to this shared journey for justice by supporting this critical body of work. Thank you for giving me the time, and we look forward to the rest of the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was beautiful, and I just want to give another round of applause because this is happening, right? It was the study was commissioned. 500 case studies from around the world is a significant number of representation. So thank you again. I want to give another big round of applause. And if your community isn't included in this, reach out to Hannah, reach out to Line, so that this can be included and done and really. Raise your really representative of what our communities are going through. So now I'm delighted to welcome our first panel. I want to welcome on stage Nonette Royo, Executive Director at the Tenure Facility, as well as Sara Omi, from Women's Movement of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. Sara and Nonette, please come on stage. And Sara is going to have an interpreter. So I don't know where the interpreter will be joining from. Yes. So for those who don't understand Spanish, there is interpretation. So you can go get the interpretation over there or in the back. You can raise your hand and it'll be, oh, I think that's better. If you raise your hand, they can get it to you. Sí. Pero okay. I'm good. Yeah. No. Everyone has who doesn't understand Spanish, their interpretation? Perfect. Amazing. So, bienvenidas. Welcome. I want to thank you for being here today, and I really want to get into what the Tenure Facility does. So, Nonette, could you please share with us what is it, the work that you do, and how do you think it's adding to the Race to Resilient campaign?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very thrilled to be part of this Race to Resilience. The Tenure Facility is an organization that has been determined and set up after extensive consultations by Indigenous peoples organized at that time by the Rights and Resources Coalition to really generate the support required by them, by the Indigenous peoples' local communities, to secure their collective land tenure. And that was really set up because they felt strongly at that time in 2014. Funding was not coming directly and was not coming at all to rights, collective land rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And so that was set up, and our goal was and is to secure at least 60 million hectares in the next few years, up to 2027. And that also includes 15 million people who are part of the community and supporting and maintaining the work of, this is why it contributes to race of resilience, protecting forests and crucial ecosystems, including inland waters, important areas for nature and biodiversity to thrive and survive. And what's crucial with this, it's important for us to remember, is that indigenous peoples and local communities do not see divisions in nature. They see connection, interconnection, and deep relationships. This is lived experience and deep relationships with Mother Earth and the provisions that Mother Earth has been providing to humanity. And what's important in this work is that over the years, they have been resilient, but because of the coming threats, that has been coming and it's threatening not just themselves, but humanity. People that are living downstream from key watersheds where they live are also under threat. And so this is where the work of the tenure facility, and that's just not us, that's really, we're a bridge to this work, contributes to the race of resilience. And tenure facility is a crucial resource and support, but there are many that we bridge with this. The policy and advocacy organizations, the indigenous-led funds that are emerging, that are now managing directly and protecting their rights, territories, and resources. So that's my answer.
What you're sharing with us is so important. Just for people who don't know, out of all of global philanthropy, less than 1% is directed towards indigenous communities, and of that, less than 1/4 actually makes it to the ground. There's a lot of money that's earmarked for indigenous causes, but communities don't actually get to manage it. So the work that you're doing is really important. And before we go to Sara, I want to ask you what regions of the world you work in so people can visualize the area.
Yes, so we are in the key tropical rainforest regions in Asia, Africa, especially in the Congo Basin, and Latin America, especially in the Amazon Basin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nanette. And now we're going to go to Sara. Sara, ¿nos cuentas más sobre la Alianza Global y el movimiento de mujeres y por qué es relevante para una campaña como esta de Race to Resilience?
Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Es un placer también de poder estar en este panel y poder contarle lo que es o representa la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales. Esta es una alianza que nace justamente para poder tener la resistencia de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Tenemos más de 10 años de estar trabajando en colectividad con 5 organizaciones que representan los últimos bosques del planeta. Ellas son pues desde Indonesia con Amán, desde la Amazonía con el Brasil, Mesoamérica de la región donde yo vengo, del pueblo Emberá de Panamá y Repaliaf de la cuenca pues del Congo. Somos estas organizaciones, nos unimos sobre todo para enfocarnos en 5 demandas tan importantes que son para nosotros como la lucha por el acceso a la tenencia de la tierra como uno de los mecanismos más importantes de la conexión que tenemos como pueblos indígenas. Segundo, a promover el respeto sobre el consentimiento libre, previo, informado de los pueblos indígenas en cuanto a programas y proyectos proyectos que vayan a afectar o impactar negativamente hacia nuestros territorios. También, también hablamos sobre la criminalización hacia líderes y lideresas que defiendan la vida del planeta. También el acceso al financiamiento, que ha sido uno de los focos tan importantes para el caso de la Alianza Global, y por eso nos unimos sobre todo para poder alzar nuestras voces, porque como ya han escuchado, pues poco llega hacia los territorios. Somos directamente lo que mantenemos la vida, la biodiversidad del planeta, a pesar de ser la población más pequeña en el mundo, pero tenemos todos esos conocimientos tradicionales que hemos mantenido y hemos demostrado, y que la ciencia así también lo dice. También luchamos para que exista el reconocimiento de nuestros conocimientos tradicionales como una de las soluciones de buenas prácticas, y como también todo el acceso que necesitamos también desde nuestra propia visión y participación como mujeres indígenas dentro de este movimiento, porque a pesar de estar en estos procesos, todavía existen acciones donde no estamos vinculadas a las mujeres indígenas y de comunidades locales, donde también estamos promoviendo de que toda esta temática tiene que ser complementaria en el trabajo que tenemos las mujeres indígenas, que también estamos en la primera línea de las afectaciones del cambio climático, pero también en la línea de cómo poder resolver, cómo estamos resistiendo ante todos los efectos que provocan, pues, los efectos, pues, del cambio climático, que no necesariamente lo hacemos nosotros estamos protegiendo, estamos cuidando la vida del planeta, no solo por nosotros, sino por todos. Entonces, en ese marco, pues la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales tiene este enfoque para poder seguir buscando a que se garanticen y se protejan los derechos de pueblos indígenas.
Muchas gracias, Sara. Sí, aplauso, por favor. Nombraste cosas, no sé si me puedes escuchar, te doy un segundo, pero nombraste cosas muy importantes. Sí me escucha, ya, gracias. Nombraste cosas muy importantes. La primera, oh, I'm going to switch to English. I'm sorry. The first thing that really stuck to me when I think of resilience just in general is, for me, resilience is synonymous to Indigenous communities, because we have been resilient for generations. Like my grandma was resilient her whole life, and before that, and our territories have been resilient, trying to keep kind of our DNA alive, the DNA of the hands of Indigenous communities stewarding that land for thousands of years. So that is the key for, if we want a resilient world, we need to go to the communities that have practiced that, because we had no other option. So I want to ask you the last question for both of you. How do you make this link between the resilience of Indigenous land and how it has to be mirrored across all territories now that we have this crisis where we need to adapt and mitigate? How can the teachings from each space that you both work in teach the world how to be resilient and arrive to this goal that we have of collective resilience?
Yes, let me go ahead first. What the Tench facility is experiencing in this work is that Indigenous peoples, when they start defining their territories, are defining a lot of things. Not only the boundaries of the maps that they're drawing, but the information that has stories, full of important stories of learning and traditional knowledge in each and every resource: the trees, the waters, the shrubs, the herbal medicines, and the songs that come with that. This get recorded, remembered, and replayed, and the young people connect with this. The women feel very much heard, and the platform that they used to take that has somehow, because of commercialization and exploitation, been taken away, get returned to them. So basically what is coming up is a very important set of information and data that informs land use. And what happens here is because government participates in verifications of these data and information that comes in when it gets registered, when there's recognition and there's titling and communal titling. Government participates in this process, and many of those that we have involved, especially at the local level, the local community, local government level, they start crying. They remember. They remember the story of the mother tree. They remember the stories of their grandparents, and these are not even directly indigenous, but they are connected. So what's important with this is that once we remember and recall together, the land use plans that get approved has information that is significant for the stakeholders that we forget most of the time, that doesn't deliver money but delivers the priceless relationships and services we all need. So that's the most important part of this work that we can really contribute. And the women, as we know, humanity has a natural calling to protect the future, and the women feel this physically. And this is when they start taking their stand and courage to really come in and say, no, you can't hurt that particular plant or this particular landscape. That's what's going to help us. That's what's going to help the children, and this is what's going to help us survive. So that's very important.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for that, please. Y ahora, Sara, ¿nos puedes compartir cómo crees que pues, el conocimiento de tu gente, de tu pueblo, pues puede ser casi llevado, ¿no?, a todos los niveles de resiliencia a nivel global?
Bueno, primero decirle que también en este escenario hemos aprendido a conocer de distintos tipos de significado o conceptos que se van que están en camino a la protección de nuestros territorios, de nuestra madre tierra. Y cuando se habla de resiliencia, para mí estamos hablando de resistencia de nuestros conocimientos, de nuestros pueblos, y esa es la mayor contribución que realizamos desde nuestras comunidades, que realizamos desde nuestro propio pensamiento, y el mecanismo tal vez que a veces no encontramos es cómo seguir impulsando nuestras voces desde la visión de los pueblos indígenas, cómo queremos ser reconocidos nuestros derechos, cómo queremos tener nuestra participación en estos tipos de escenarios que hoy conocemos. Y por ende siento que esta campaña puede ayudar en muchas vías. Primero, a cómo acercar esa brecha de entendimiento en el mundo del por qué es tan importante el reconocimiento de los derechos territoriales de los pueblos indígenas, de esa conexión que tenemos con nuestro bosque, con nuestra espiritualidad, con nuestra cosmovisión, porque es allí donde se centra la realidad de nuestro pueblo y de lo que necesita nuestra madre tierra, que hoy lo conocemos como el planeta en donde estamos. Siento que también la oportunidad de ese acceso al financiamiento del que tanto se habla y que se enfoca, también tiene que ir dirigido hacia las mujeres indígenas, porque somos las mujeres las que mantenemos la resistencia, los conocimientos, nuestra identidad dentro de nuestras comunidades, somos las que estamos pensando en esa colectividad como tal. Formamos parte de nuestra propia gobernanza a niveles de nuestros territorios, y es allí donde se necesita enlazar todos estos tipos de campañas que permitan acercarnos para que existan y se crean políticas integrales que reconozcan y que puedan estar en armonía con nuestros conocimientos y nuestra madre tierra. A eso considero que debe también enfocarse todo este tipo de campaña que nos permita conectarnos, nuestros conocimientos tradicionales con el mundo occidental, pero desde esa mirada, de esa perspectiva, desde esa armonía que necesitamos entre todos.
Muchas gracias. Y creo que sí, justo esto que dijiste, just exactly what you said, is the key. The fact that what's being kept is not only the act of being resilient, but what's behind that resilience, all this beautiful knowledge that all of us can share. So I want to thank you both so much for the work that you're doing in bridging indigenous worlds and knowledge and cosmovision to this Western world that needs so much vision on how to get to the next side of this transformation that we're undergoing. So thank you. Round of applause, please. And now we're going to welcome our next panel. Muchas gracias, Sara. I'm so excited for this next panel. First, we have Elizabeth Waturi, a close friend of mine, who's the founder of Green Generation Initiative. Elizabeth? Oh, now I'm still talking with my Spanish accent. And also Jocelyn King, founding director and chairperson of First Australians Capital. Yes, round of applause. I think we have two very interesting and important perspectives here. And I want to give you both the chance to share not only a bit of your story, but also your vision in resilience with everybody here. So first, Liz. Liz and I have known each other, I think, for 4 or 5 years. And we met each other just walking through the venues of COP. So it's great to be with you, Liz. Can you let me know what is Indigenous people's knowledge for you and how Indigenous people's knowledge can accelerate building resilience from your perspective? And can you share an example of your work also and your community?
Thank you so much, Shea, and it's so lovely to meet again at the COP and at this very beautiful space at the Resilience Hub, discussing and sharing our perspectives about the work that we do. I'm going to begin by sort of painting a picture of, what I feel and what I've seen, because as part of the work that we're doing with the Green Generation Initiative, we work with children, young people, but also like local communities. And one of the things that I have seen is the power that comes with being able to empower communities, empowering Indigenous people, and making sure that tools and resources can trickle down to their level and to the places where they're really doing the real work to make sure that they also feed into the conversations that we're having at this scale. I also see it as a commissioner in the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, where we've been able to see the real impact also that the Indigenous people have, even in terms of the transboundary water flows, because many people will say that water comes from the tap, but really water comes from the catchments that are being protected by people. And I think these are perspectives that need to always come out really strongly and find, perspectives and completely document the Indigenous knowledge, because it has to be part and parcel of the policies you're making, and also it has to make part of the science. And I think for me, this is knowledge that is deeply rooted in the land, in the water, in nature, and this is what makes these people value the environment, value the ecosystems, and protect them. And it's basically drawn from what they see, what they've learned, and what surrounds them, and what makes them now, from that perspective, find solutions even to the most complex challenges that we speak about in these spaces. I've seen this work in one of the communities that we work with that is called Solio, and this is a community that once used to settle in the forest, and so they had their values and their perspectives and their practices were deeply rooted within the ecosystem and within the trees and the forests that were with them, and the rivers within the space that were flowing close to their homesteads. And this community was resettled in one of the most dry areas in my country. And what happened from the first time they were resettled there, of course, all they've known in their life was a place that could grow food, a place that was thriving with the ecosystem and the beautiful trees. But now here's a bare land. And most of the people actually, they left and they sold their lands because they did not see any value within that land. But a lot of those that stayed, we saw that they held on to their values. They held on to that which they knew and valued, within conservation. And right now they've been able to grow back the land, and it's a beautiful village that is full of trees. They have their own microclimate. They're receiving rainfall, and we can tell that it actually keeps increasing yield each and every time, because they started by planting trees across every section of their land. And these trees for them is because they knew that something could come off this land. And right now, what once used to be a bare land is now an entire green village. And what the communities now have adopted are, perspectives of how they can even harvest the rainwater, because now they're receiving rainwater, and they're using that to sustain their livelihoods, to sustain their families. And this is part of a project we're actually doing called the Water Funds. And within that project, there's more than 185,000 farmers that are part of the network. But the beauty of this is looking at how the perspectives, of communities, of indigenous people, they actually need to form part of the science, because they are what have continued to define everything that we talk about today. And even from the basics of some of the practices we've seen from our communities, for instance, there's a sacred tree in my community that for a long time we've known should not be cut down. And that tree, up until today, people have continued to hold so much strong value for it, because it's known to be sacred, and it's known to hold so much value within the community. And up until today, with all the generations that have been there, this has been passed on along. And right now, if you need to cut that tree, it needs to have some perspectives, and rituals have to be performed for that to be done. And it also signifies that, there's going to be something bad that's going to happen within the community. So people have taken that up and protected that tree, and up until now it's still like the most highly valued tree. And even when we have developments coming up, that tree is always kept there and it cannot be cut down. I think these are perspectives that are really strongly important, and also looking at how the largest percentage of what we have protected in nature is actually protected by indigenous people. So if we are not having them present in the decisions, if we are not documenting this knowledge as well and making it form part of policies, form part of science, then we're also not being true to ourselves, because this is what has defined what we have right now. And I think the fact that there's value coming along with it, because at the end of the day, if we have to protect nature, if we have to address the climate crisis, honestly, it has to come from deep within ourselves. It cannot always be that people are doing it because it's a duty imposed upon you, because you have a title or you have to do something. I think it has to be deeply rooted. And if there is an example that we have to pick all around the world, it is the values that the indigenous people have always held strongly, deeply rooted in the land, in the water, in what surrounds us, because that is what is going to sustain us as humanity. And we must embrace it in everything that we do, in the decisions that we make, and in every allocation we make, even including finances. How well are these, indigenous initiatives also well financed? When speaking about climate finance, it has to be as part and parcel of this conversation. And I think that is what will help us be able to make progress as a world.
Liz, thank you so much. And I mean, something that comes to mind when you share all of this is that for many indigenous communities across the world, even being called indigenous was a big part of the fight. Some people, and in negotiation text, it was a fight of decades to be able to recognize indigenous communities outside of what is the Americas. And to that, I want to go to you, Jocelyn, as well, because you have a different perspective from Australia. And a lot of what you shared, Liz, also is about displacement of people, which is something that also happens like all across our communities. And getting this transformation legislated is very important. So Jocelyn, can you share with us part of your story and what you're working on?
Thank you. Yes, hello everyone. My name's Jocelyn King. I'm a Bundjalung woman, which is a community in northern New South Wales in Australia. And I'm here with a couple of hats on as the chairperson of First Australians Capital, but also as an Aboriginal woman that is trying to reinvigorate our natural food systems back home as well. For the international community, I thought I might start with a little bit of the history of what we now call Australia. But Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, over 350 different nations on the continent now called Australia, we are the oldest continuing culture on Earth, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And in fact, our old people tell us that we come from that country. We didn't come from other countries. We didn't come across in any migrations. That we came from the animals of that land, and we have responsibility to those animals and to those places that we're connected to. So a lot of people might not know that about Australia. But in 1788, when the English boats arrived, there were about 1 million people living in Australia. And the English actually declared terra nullius, or no man's land, because when they first met our people and our people were asked, who owns this land? Who do we treaty with? Our old people said, nobody owns this land. You cannot own your mother. We have responsibilities, whereas Western culture talks about having rights. And so when you have a different value system, that makes the negotiations even harder. And so basically we've been fighting for our right to take responsibility since that first time. And I just wanted to share a little bit of a story about resilience from our old people. I just want to get a quick poll of the room. Does anyone know what a midden is? Have you heard the term middens? Okay, so we've got one up the back, maybe two. I'll explain. So middens are basically big shell mounds that exist all around Australia. I'm sure they exist in other places in the world. They're probably called something different. But they're a sustainability tool that our old people used. Because nobody owned the land, we had responsibility to care for country based on where we were located, so place-based as well. But middens were a bit of a universal sustainability tool. And what would happen is if you were travelling through country and you were coming into a new place that you weren't at all the time, the first place you would go would be the middens. And there would be piles of either shells or bones layered on top of each other. But you would look at the top layer, and if the top layer was an oyster shell, then you knew not to take oysters, because there had been enough taken of the oysters and you needed to give an opportunity for them to regrow and regenerate. So you might have some fish and you would leave the fish bones on top. So this is a built-in sustainability tool that lasted for thousands of years. And so now you can see these middens going for kilometres along the edges of waterways, on the edges of the beaches, and you can actually see them on the tops of mountains from when the water levels were much higher. So as our people survived ice ages, those practices continued on and on. And so it's that knowledge about how to survive in a changing climate that is so valuable to the work that we're trying to achieve here at COP. So a little bit more historical context, and that is that for a very, very long time, and even today this persists, Aboriginal people have been legislatively excluded from participating in the economy. So in Australia, up until the 1960s, and my grandfather is an example of this, Aboriginal men needed to get a certificate of exemption to leave missions and reserves that they'd been pushed onto in order to work. And when they did actually get a job, there's called a Wards Ordinance Act that was enacted that said that Aboriginal men only got half the pay of their non-Indigenous counterparts, and that money had to be put in trust in banks. They couldn't actually receive it themselves because they were incapable of managing money. We also didn't have a physical currency in our traditional culture. Our currency was relationships. So if you needed something, you had an obligation for your community to provide it, and vice versa. So this whole monetary system is quite new, I think, for Indigenous people globally, and particularly in the Australian context. So we'd been forced to rely on grants, and as we've heard, only 1% of philanthropy goes to First Nations people across the globe, and then only a quarter of it meets the actual operations on the ground. If we extend that into finance, it's even less. So in 2008, a group of leaders in our community started to talk about, well, how could we stand up an Indigenous-led intermediary to provide finance to our communities, to bring this knowledge and develop a new economy based on those traditional knowledges. And so I'm really pleased to say that we now have an Indigenous first, impact first fund where we've been able to attract capital that we can lend to Indigenous groups in Australia. And yeah, we're here at COP just talking about, you know, this knowledge is valuable and we need it to actually be valued, not just extracted. And so that's the work that we're doing in Australia.
Wow. What you shared is so beautiful, and I'm sure we all learned something, or maybe not two people, but everybody else learned something new. And it's just those practices that are, like you said, they survived ice ages. Like that is millenary knowledge. And if we want to get to the next millennium being here and having these conversations, we need to go back to those practices. Hello, hello. Okay, I think it ran out of battery. Thank you so much. Well, Liz, I don't know if you have to leave, if you have another commitment, but we're gonna go into Q&A. Do you have to excuse yourself? Yeah. Okay. So Liz is gonna leave. Can we give her a big round of applause? Thank you so much for sharing with us and for being here. And I want to invite Sara and is still here. Yes, Nanette. Sara and Nanette up to the stage for Q&A. Probably can take like 2, maybe 3 questions, depending. But please, if you have any other questions that you would like to ask them, raise your hand, and the microphone is right there. One question over there.
Okay. So my question to you about the integration with local universities. I have seen one case about the use of Inuit culture in northern Canada because they have a vast knowledge of the ice formations. So they use their knowledge as observers for the permafrost thawing, so which is a major climatic issue because they have so many words for different formations of ice. So in that case, the indigenous people are used for basically ground truthing. So they do the observation using satellite image and everything, but the local people on the ground, in their own forests, in their own fields, in their own valleys, they do basically correct the models. They help the scientists correct the models by collecting observations from the ground. So in that case, are there programs within their communities for individual people from the indigenous community to collect data within like citizen science programs and initiatives? Thank you.
That's a great question. And so I can answer it in 2 parts. Firstly, there are lots of opportunities in Australia for universities to do research. Unfortunately, a lot of that research has been, the funds go to the universities and the researchers, not the Indigenous people. So that's really important because we also want to be able to own that knowledge and maintain it in our communities. So I think it's important to respect that knowledge. And the second thing is, and this another thing that I've been talking about here at COP is that our knowledges need to be respected without the Western science validating it. You know, we've been doing this for thousands of years, and if we have to work with scientists to actually prove that that's correct, then we're wasting time. We know how urgent this challenge is. And so I think that we need to recognise that we have the science. It's not in English. So in Australia, English is the mostly spoken language. That science is not in English. So rather than in making our people go and actually go through the hoops of Western science, scientists need to actually work with us and make sure that they recognise this knowledge in the absence of those Western paradigms.
Thank you, Jocelyn, for that. And I'm sure there are so many examples of communities working with universities, but it has been an extractive relationship. So it's the question, I think, goes beyond, like, backwards from that. Like, the foundation of that question is, how does that relationship start and why, right? So is there another question? We have time for one more question. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. This is just a question about finance. You know, we've heard that traditionally it's hard to access as Indigenous peoples, and so I'm really keen to hear what needs to look different to get those flows of funds coming your way.
does anyone else want to have a...
Oh, it needs to. Yes, that's our question too. Where we are right now in this work of really focusing on finance, meaning, but ours is very focused on making sure finance goes to the work of securing land rights, because that's so underfunded. Just that alone has been teaching us a lot. And what primarily it is there are two different worldviews of accountability and eligibility, right? And for the finance that we're looking at right now, which is really governmental financing and also private foundation financing, there is this term now that we're trying to form, then not us but our partners, of saying that their systems are accountable and they have a way of making everyone understand that this is the level. It's downward accountability. There is accountability, and that's in community gatherings and in understanding where the money flows. But that's not how the Western world looks at it. There are different ways of, and these are ways that basically taxpayers of a country that provides the funding needs, right? So we understand that, and the bridging of it is the biggest challenge. And that still continues to be a challenge. But we are forming many experiences that could become policy, and that's what's helping us right now.
That's great. I'd like to take that one step further and just say that finance colonizes. Without finance, colonization does not happen. So we need to decolonize finance. That's what we need to start talking about. You know, the idea that there's growth without limits on a finite planet is insanity. So we need finance to go to the communities to do the work that will keep us all alive.
Siento desde nuestra perspectiva que para poder a que llegue el acceso a financiamiento directo hacia los territorios y comunidades de los pueblos indígenas, existe mucha burocracia para poder tener acceso a la misma. Y este camino también nos lleva a que esto debe cambiar. Solamente se quedan en proyectos o programas que no son construidos también desde nuestras bases, desde nuestros territorios. Y este enfoque tiene que ser entendible, porque lo principal, el principio para nosotros es asegurar nuestros territorios, es el respeto de nuestros conocimientos tradicionales y como lo decía Ana al principio, de que no es caridad. No somos beneficiarios tampoco, debemos ser socios en todo el proceso de construcción para que podamos tener las garantías necesarias y asegurar la supervivencia de nuestra madre tierra, que está enferma y que necesitamos repararla, y para repararla es una contribución de todos y todas, de aliados estratégicos que permita llevarnos a entendernos para poder lograr los objetivos de poder cuidar y reparar a nuestra madre tierra.
We're going to interpret.
Hi, is it working? Yeah. So from our perspective, what Sara's saying is that money is barely reaching communities, and when it reaches communities, there's a lot of bureaucracy involved to access it. So this is what needs to change, because right now these projects are reaching us, but in a very limited way that don't reflect our vision or our worldview. We need the approach of these projects, of this money, to be understandable for our own worldviews, because our main objective or mission is to protect our land and to protect our values, our way of life. As my sister said earlier, this isn't charity. We are not beneficiaries either. What we need to be and what we are is we should be partners in order to guarantee the continued life of our Mother Earth, which we need to repair because right now she's ill, and we need the support of all people, of all our strategic partners, in order to reach this objective, which is to care for our Mother Earth.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Gracias, Sara. I want to just give these three powerful women a big round of applause, and also Liz, because they're teaching us so much knowledge, so much insight in just this short amount of time. So I am grateful. I'm sure we're all grateful. And you can go back to your seats if you wish. Oh, no, stay. We're going to take a photo. Well, thank you. Aplauso. Now, if you can put your headphones back on, we're going to have just one last closing. Sí, se pueden sentar aquí o also, just a quick logistical reminder to give back the interpretation devices once you're done using them. And to close, I want to give the word to Marcia Toledo, who is the Director of Adaptation and Resilience at the Climate Champions team. So, Marcia, please take the floor, and everybody welcome Marcia, and we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's definitely a pleasure to be here with you and to get to know you very closely. We heard during this session very important keywords that we take with a lot of care and we value at the campaign Race to Resilience. My colleague Maria Aguilar, campaign manager, very much open to be reached if you are interested to participate in the campaign. But what we are here for is to recognize Indigenous knowledge means resilience. I really appreciate that you said that. And for really recognizing the effective adaptation management solutions that have been implemented, we need to better understand and elevate that knowledge, those cases, those opportunities, so they are at the same level, at the same eye level that any other stakeholders. And that's what the offers the Race to Resilience campaign, is putting key stakeholders at the same level to offer opportunities, to identify how we can actually work together so that these benefits can be shared, these opportunities can be expanded, and there's better interpretation of what it means to actually advance resilience. Advanced resilience has to come from within and with a people-centered approach, which is exactly the goal of the campaign. And in that sense, we're really excited that we can welcome the tenure facility, but as well soon to welcome the women's movement and the Global Alliance Territorial Communities before the end of the year. So really excited that they applied and are going to be a second partner as well, helping us work with you on these important issues. Climate, nature, and people agenda are together. And we do want to make sure that we have Indigenous people at the front and center, that we have an opportunity to contribute and better integrate your narrative, but as well elevate your leadership. So thank you again. And please stay, we do have a reception, so happy to continue engaging with you.
I'm just going to open the reception. So, dear partners and friends, welcome.